G'day, I'm Tim Thompson, and today I'm at Tahbilk Winery in central Victoria to find out about some innovative things that they're doing to improve soil health and ultimately build better vines to make better wine. Let's go and meet their environment and vineyard research analyst, Lachie Thomas, yes they have one, and find out all about the innovative things that they're doing and how they're actually measuring them. G'day Lachie, how are you mate?
I'm very well, Tim.
That's
how are you?
Good. Oh, look mate, I'm thrilled to be out here. I've been out to Tahbilk several times in the past and I've always had an envious look at the different things that you're trialling and playing with. And you're doing some quite innovative things and I'm hoping that we can have a look at them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting to have you here today and we've got a lot to show you. There's a lot of interesting projects that we've been working on, really looking at that story of how do we improve our vines and our soil and our whole ecosystem to get better results and farm in a more natural, sustainable and regenerative way.
So you're still maintaining some traditional areas and some traditional growing techniques, and that gives you the ability to actually measure whether these new techniques are actually helping, and you found some surprising results.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting property in the way that we do have so many different systems all playing out at the same time.
Yep.
And so really being in an ever-evolving space in that regenerative, sustainable, organic, conventional, all the different styles of farming that are out there now, we're really having a hand in every pie and just figuring out what works best for our system and where we're farming.
So Lachie, this is very familiar to me. You've got a herbicided undervine swath, free of weeds. The predominant theory being there's no competition for nutrients for the vine. And we're on the main driveway here. It makes for a really nice looking appearance for visitors coming in and it makes for easy management, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's a key aspect of why it's still in play at Tahbilk here and why it's still something that we're keeping up amongst the different processes that we are doing. So it does look clean, it looks tidy, and it really ticks that aesthetic box, as well as it does make easy management. When we're harvesting, we don't have grass sitting up in the canopy that gets clogged in the harvester, all these kind of things. But it's not necessarily the approach that we want to take moving forward. We don't have a living soil. We don't have anything to support microbial life, the things that really work to, I guess, in conjunction with the grasses, to really look at making nutrients accessible to the plant, to the vines. And really, we've got an area that's bare. In the hot summer sun, it just absorbs all the heat and reflects it back up into the canopy.
Yep, so you can get fruit burn, things like that.
Fruit burn, where we're losing soil moisture. It's got a very practical and aesthetic aspect to it, but there's a lot of challenges that it does create when we're looking at that overall soil health, vine health picture.
So we'll go now and we'll have a look at something that's becoming really popular now where I'm from, and that's undervine cultivation instead of herbicide use. And it's not necessarily the best approach you've found. Let's go and have a look at it and find out.
Let's have a look. So Tim, this is one of our cultivated areas where we're really using that cultivation machine to really build these mounds under the vine. And
really, aesthetically it's not that much different to herbicide, is it? We've still got our bare soil.
Exactly. It's basically the exact same thing. We're not using chemicals, instead we're using machine, but that's the exact same approach. We can use the machine and lay it down flat and it would look exactly the same as a herbicided area.
This approach really comes from the whole mind frame. Chemicals equals bad. Don't use chemicals, do something else. We still need nice clean vine rows. But you found that there's an issue with cultivation that actually probably makes chemical use look good.
It is really interesting. So largely adopting the cultivation practices here was a result of converting some of our vineyards to an organic practice. We can't use those synthetic chemicals like herbicides, and so we needed an option to control that undervine area. And so the natural reaction was to go to cultivation because it's something that's been done for a long time and we know it can have a predictable outcome and work like this.
Yes.
And so was the reflex reaction, and it's becoming really popular in the vineyard space. We've had a mixed range of impacts from this cultivation, and really what we've found, especially in this area here, is that the ongoing cultivation has had a lot of time put into it. So really, to get this up to the scratch and maintain it to where it is, it takes a lot of labour and machinery use. Sometimes it'll be 4 to 5 passes per row.
Yep.
Once you've got it up to scratch, it can be more efficient using 1 or 2 passes, but that's still a lot of time, compaction in the mid rows, and a lot of work going in through your machine to do this.
Yep.
But then, more importantly, where we've found that we've been doing this for quite a few years, especially on these soils here, which we've got a mix of sand and some clay, it really, in
Pretty
some
powdery.
you'll find a lot of run-off though. So we've really destroyed that soil structure in that top bit.
And that's critical because you've got waterways and wetlands right behind you, and you don't want your soil and your fertiliser running off into them, do you?
Exactly. And when it rains, we want that rainfall to go into the ground. We don't want it to run off down these channels back onto the road.
Yeah.
And so really what we've found is that it's created challenges like that where even though we're only disturbing that top little section of the profile, there's a few things that happen in that profile that are really important. And if that creates a little pan by constantly mixing that up, it's really underneath it gets quite hard, and we get a layer where really it just becomes like a concrete pad.
So you've actually had some active research done that suggests that this is actually worse for the ground than herbicide. Can you tell me a little bit about the results of that research?
Sure. So we had an honours student come and work with us for a year with an undervine cover cropping trial that we were doing. So part of that trial, we had a whole range of techniques from growing grasses under the vine, herbiciding and cultivating. Through that trial, as well as a literature review done by the honours student, was that in a whole range of different farming systems, what they've found in general is that the cultivation is having the most impact on the microbes in the soil.
So the most detrimental impact. So it's killing more microbes than herbicide.
Exactly. So that,
oh my God.
And continual herbicide heavy use will have a different impact, but a light one, maybe two herbicides a year to control that.
So
that
sensible
load.
use of herbicide, not
sensible
stupid.
Use. Yeah, will impact the microbial populations. It will certainly knock them down.
And probably thin them out. There'll probably be fewer species.
And thin them out, but they will recover, and hence why the infrequent disturbance is okay.
Whereas if you destroy the soil structure and remove all living things, there's nothing for the microbes to grow on.
Exactly.
At least with herbicide, they've got the dead roots still in the soil, they've still got the percolation holes, they've got all of that oxygen. You're removing all of that with the cultivation.
Exactly. So that's what we found through our research here.
So you haven't stopped. You're still not suggesting that herbicide is definitely the way to go for you guys, have you? You've got two more things to show me.
Yep, absolutely. So we have a mulch that we use. So a straw mulch that comes from the cropping land on the property here. But we're also trying to naturally grow our own mulch by just growing grasses and then letting them make their own mulch under the vines. So we can take a look at those.
So this is your straw mulch block, Lachie, and you're getting a lot of benefits out of the straw.
We sure are. So here we have a block that's been strawed this year. And really, the reason we're doing this is we've got access to really good straw all around us. We've got cropping country all around us, and so we can take it from the paddock next to the block of the vines here and put it straight underneath. And really the reason that we're doing that is we see a huge amount of benefits. Both when we look through and down at the soil, we'll see in general a lot of worms when we pull back this straw, and a lot of great microbial activity happening. So it's a real hotbed of life and activity, which is really drawing a lot of benefit for the vines. During summer, the key benefit is that really after a night like last night where it's just rained and we've got all this moisture, or whether it's coming through our irrigation channels, the straw really helps hold that moisture in where the vines can then access it. So they'll get a lot less stress during summer. And really what we see is the benefit of that, we get approximately a 20% increase in yield. So the other reason that we love the straw here is that as opposed to cultivation or the herbicide where there's a lot of upkeep in that style, really once we put the straw out here, this is going to take another 3 or 4 years to break down. So we're getting the benefit of that straw, the increased moisture holding capacity, the reduced heat stress. Those benefits are going to stay with us for the next 3 or 4 years having put this out. So really it is an upfront investment of time and capital to purchase and then put the straw out, but really it's an investment for the next 3 or 4 years everywhere that we do it. So we're just walking into our trial area where we've been doing a multi-year study, just looking at the different types of grasses and treatments that you can do under vine to really look at what the benefit is of the different systems we're implementing here at Tahbilk.
So what have we got here, Lachie?
So this is one of the more interesting trials that we've been running over the last few years here at Tahbilk. So we've got a section in the middle of vineyard block here where we've trialled seven different treatments. So we've trialled herbiciding, cultivation, control, just to be able to have a comparative section, as well as 3 different grass trials. So we've had a medic and clover mix, a Wimmera ryegrass on its own, and then a medic and clover and ryegrass combination as a regenerative grass blend.
So you've had 1 species, 2 species, 3 species, and with the research project that's been undertaken, you actually got some real data from that And what's been the result?
We did. So the really fascinating things from the honours student that spent a year looking at this was that having the combination of species was the most beneficial to the system that we could find. So really what that means is by looking at the carbon and nitrogen flux levels, which are a way to compare how much microbial activity is happening in the soil, we found that significantly higher than any other treatment was the medic and ryegrass together. More microbial activity, which is then hopefully converting more of that nitrogen and different minerals into plant accessible forms.
Okay.
But really what we've found is that all the other treatments were on a reasonably comparative basis. We did find that the cultivation was significantly lower than the others, whereas the combination of grasses and even things here where we've got prickly lettuce and other weeds, they're all contributing to that diversity that's really bringing more microbial life and health to the soil.
So people say a lot of the time that biodiversity, multiple species, has benefits, but they really say it as this nebulous statement that doesn't really mean anything. It's just a nice statement of intent, but you've actually got hard data on carbon and nitrogen levels in the soil, and you can absolutely say the more species you included under the vine, the higher your carbon and nitrogen levels were.
We can, and we can also say through measuring the yield and grape quality data that we collect as we come into the picking and winemaking process, that doing this has had no negative effect on any of our quality metrics or our yields.
So your phenolics have remained the same, the vine's still doing what it does.
Yep.
But as you've noted, have you got the higher yield benefit that you've had with the straw mulching, or has the yield come back down to a normal yield?
It's highly varied. So on average, nothing was significantly or statistically significantly different from one another. So we can show that there's no net detriment. And to date, we haven't found a net benefit in terms of yield like we do with the straw, which is just so concentrated.
Yep.
But I think over a longer study, which this has been in action for this will be the third year now. But I think over that 5+ year, we'll really start to see
building up a bank of organic matter under the vines will end up becoming like straw that you don't have to pay for, you don't have to spread, and you don't need machinery to manage.
Exactly. It's an investment and it takes time to come through, but really that's the aim. And you can see here where this has all been self-seeded this year, so you can see the seeds from the medic and clover here. They'll just drop down into a nice mulch bed, and then they'll be able to germinate because they've got that cover and and that ideal environment to re-germinate. So these prickly lettuce, milk thistles, all the different types you see out are really a reaction to a problem in the system. So they're here to help rectify an imbalance. So really, prior to this trial, this area had been heavily herbicided for
probably 30 or 40
years and years and years, and so there's still a lot of imbalance in the soil that these guys are trying to fix. Whereas at the same time, we're building up the species that we do want and really getting what we want in place. We'll still have these solving issues for a while, but
they won't be a predominant plant in the undervine.
No, they'll do their job, and within a few years in other areas we've seen that they just start to remove themselves, and it goes back to looking like a really beautiful, just grassy, permanent sward system.
If you had to rank all of the different treatments, such as herbiciding, undervine tillage, straw mulching and multiple species cover crops, how would you rank them according to your research that you've done on the farm so far?
So there's a few different aspects to that, but I think the undervine cover cropping would come out on top. So the straw mulch we do see a lot of benefit from, but having that active living root system growing and interacting with the soil and then becoming a mulch just brings that extra layer up. That's something that we're looking at going forward, is how can we, and the easy answer is just let the grass grow, do this across more of our vineyards. I think the thing to recognise as well is the species is important, because there are grasses, paspalum, couch, that can be detrimental to vines and the quality and the yield. So there are things to watch out for. But a lot of those problem weeds are really, problem grasses are really there and often come back in response to having disturbances in soil. So once we can, and that's why the seeding can be a beneficial thing, we can really curate what is undervine. So you do have to be careful. You don't want the wrong species to take over. And anything in dominance is creating an issue. It's
not just lazy management. It is actually requiring a lot of really careful thought and application and curation around the sides to make it work.
And it's not a one size fits all approach either. There's every year you'll see a different outcome. So this year, where we've had a huge rainfall, cool year, our ryegrass has grown this tall, which is probably more higher than where we actually want it. In normal, drier, hotter year, it might only get this tall and be perfect. So it's how do you react in the different years to really address what the situation needs. It is keeping an eye on things. It is mowing it if you have to mow it. It is really just being observant. If you can, the ideal scenario is to let it go long enough that it will go to seed so that it will set and just self-germinate the next year. But you do have to be wary of, in a wet year, maybe you do have to mow it or spray it out or use different tactics to really get the final outcome that you need.
Now, you're also using some compost teas here as well, and you've got some interesting positives and negatives from using compost on the vines. I'd love to have a chat to you about that.
Yeah, let's go have a look.
All right, let's have a look.
So obviously we grow our grapes, we crush them, we take the juice, and then we're left with the skins and the stalks and stems. And so that's perfect material to then start, a compost pile. So we use local sources of hay as well. On Tahbilk, we've got a lot of cropping land.
Yep.
And so we'll cut the hay and use that in our compost, as well as chicken manure from local farms and a few other different ingredients that we source. So we are huge advocates of composting. We love it. It's a great idea. But I think what we've really learned is that you have to be really careful in the way that you're composting and how you're using that compost.
So it's not just a case of make your compost, put it under the vines, everything's going to be sweet. Once again, if you're using these methodologies, you've got to be smart and you've got to use them in the right place, the right time, the right amount.
Exactly. We made our compost, we thought we were doing the right thing. We put a lot of it under the vine, we covered in mulch and thought this would be terrific for the vines. But what we've actually found is that the nutrient load in the compost, being all grape mark, was really high in potassium, and that's had a negative effect on the growth of our vines. So you can see here with the early growth of the vines when they came out of dormancy, the high nutrient load and the potassium really antagonised other nutrient uptake and really burnt off some of these leaves here. So we've seen the compost really doing a good job of what it's doing, but it's done it too well for us.
So how are these results going to inform your use of compost? Are you going to stop using it, or are you going to change something about what you're doing, Lachie?
We'll keep making it, and we'll just adjust how we're using it. So I think what it's proven to us is that we can make good compost that is nutrient rich, which is
certainly powerful.
It's a big tick, but I think what we've learned is to really be careful in our approach and use it appropriately. So instead of now banding it really heavily under vine, we'll broadacre it lightly, so we can still get that benefit coming into the soil, adding that organic matter back, but not in such high levels that will really affect the vines negatively. So being more careful in our approach.
So by measuring the nutrient content and limiting nutrient content, you have to scale back the application so that your potassium adjustment is correct.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just as scientific as using commercial fertiliser, but you're making it yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you also make compost teas as well, and you're using them through your fertigation system, and you're getting some surprising results with them.
We are. So we're using the waste from our restaurant at Tahbilk here and using those food scraps to feed a worm farm. And then that worm farm will then slowly leach out all the lactate, and then that worm juice we use as one of the ingredients in our compost teas. So we'll take some of this compost and put it in bags and hang it in an old IBC shuttle.
Yep.
We'll put in the worm juice, we'll put in different leftovers from our other fertigation materials, so that could be seaweeds, it could be leftover fish emulsions, all these kind of good little products.
Yep, so just whatever you've got left over, you bung in.
The scraps that didn't make it out into the line, just the last little clumpy bits, we'll put it all in, brew it all up together, and then when we do another fertigation of whether it's nitrogen or other trace elements, iron, boron, magnesium, we'll follow the lines through with our compost tea. So we're putting out what the vines want and then giving them an extra little boost and kick for all the microbes as well.
So you're still using some commercial fertilisers, you have to, because you've got to guarantee results for a commercial operation.
Yep.
But you're following those with a kick of compost tea to bring your soil biota back to life, as it were, after that addition. And you've actually found that as a result of using those compost teas, you've gone down somewhat in the amount of commercial fertilisers that you have to use. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the nitrogen obviously is there for the vine health, but really we want to have a more holistic, well-rounded approach that really focuses on the whole soil health.
And so nitrogen's getting really expensive now too.
And nitrogen is getting really expensive. So that's where, if we have our cover cropping species with the medics and clovers that fix nitrogen into the soil, and then we're following through with our compost teas that are really there to provide the benefit to the microbes so that they can then do the conversion of that nitrogen into a plant accessible form, then we can have greater levels of actual plant growth. So really we're seeing that added benefit of really focusing on the microbes, helping support the overall vine health. So we're getting more out of our nitrogen fertigations as well.
So some vineyards would be using, say, 80 to 120 units of nitrogen every year. How much do you use?
We're using 20 in our system here. So
Which is very low.
It is very low. It is, every vineyard's in a specific location, climate, production yields, everyone's got different goals, but we are on the lower end, and we're really trying to do that in all of our management approaches with all the chemicals we use. We're trying to have the most minimal approach that we can. We want to still guarantee that crop and the success and the health of that vine, but we want to do it in the most sustainable way we can, in the most regenerative way we can when we're looking at the underfloor management, and really looking at how can we have that minimum intervention to really, maximise the vine health and minimise our damage to the broader ecosystem.
Lachie, it's been fascinating going through with you all of the varied approaches that Tahbilk is using to try and harness the power of nature and reduce costs and improve the outcomes for the environment. And mate, I can't wait to come back in a few years' time and see how it's all going. I hope you'll have me back then.
Absolutely.
And it's been wonderful learning. And guys, if you like this kind of content, don't forget, subscribe, thumbs up, and there's plenty more content like this and more on timthompson.ag. Lachie, thanks very much, mate.
Thanks, Tim.
Been a blast.